Good morning or afternoon or whatever time of day it is for you. For me, it's morning. Welcome back to the Illumio Cloud Security Series. I'm Erica Bagby, your host, going to be taking you through this thought leadership series we're really excited about here because migrating to the cloud comes with a lot of nuances, a lot of complications. We're here to tackle those issues. We're here to help you navigate your cloud journey, and securely migrating to the cloud is the keyword, securely. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. Today, we will be talking about challenges in securing the cloud. We have our very own joining me this week for this topic, Krister Schwartz. He is our technical marketing engineer here at Illumio, going to help me unpack the nuances of what the challenges really are for securing the cloud and how we can navigate that together. So without further ado, welcome, Krister. Thank you for joining me. I'm just going to dive into it. Kick it off. This topic, challenges in securing the public cloud. I figured you would be a great person to discuss this with and peel back some of the layers and the nuances about what those challenges actually have proven to be. So I'm going to kick it off with perception, because it seems to me that there are more factors inhibiting a successful transition to securely migrating to the cloud based on organizational structure and processes and culture. I mean, ultimately, what we're discussing here is change thrusted upon us. We know we are reluctant and slowed to change, especially big transitions in our lives or in productivity, organizations, how we run the world, all the things. But 2020 COVID thrusted us into a very rapid migration and adoption to change, cloud being one of those big things. So how is perception going to be critical in securely migrating to the cloud?
Well, I think one of the biggest things I see is that every cloud vendor has a lot of security tools, and the perception is that they're doing it for you. Whereas if you read the fine print, they're securing the underlying infrastructure, basically their core fabric, up to you, the customer. Now, what you deploy on that fabric is your job, not theirs. But too often people seem to forget that, and they end up experiencing a breach and wondering what happened. So I think people need to be careful that, yes, the cloud provider is providing the fabric for you, but they're securing the fabric, not the workloads. That, I think, is probably the biggest wake-up call that people have had. Once people realize that, I think the other challenge is a lot of people want to have some kind of multi-cloud architecture. So they'll argue, well, okay, this cloud vendor has some security tools that I can use to secure my workload, so I'll just use that. But then they get a second cloud vendor for, maybe one's for development, one's for production. They have security tools also, but they're not the same. And in trying to have two different portals to manage something becomes, hard to operationalize at scale. So really, you want to have one solution for your workload security, agnostic to where they're hosted. So you can move it to cloud 1, cloud 2, then carry that segmentation solution with you, rather than breaking each time you move and then trying to rehook into another cloud.
Yeah, that's a great point. So what you're saying is the perception of moving to the cloud comes with a lot of process changes that we need to consider about living in a multi-cloud world, because ultimately we will be living with multiple different types of architectures, and a layer extracted above that is agnostic to the underlying architecture can give us a way to cohesively monitor security, right? Is that the concept? Because we will have, on-premise environments, private clouds, public clouds in the foreseeable future. I don't see that changing.
Right, and to correlate during a breach, if a breach is happening right now, it's very difficult to follow what's going on. If I have to shift from these tools to those tools that aren't talking to each other, by the way, and I have
different language.
Yeah, different language, different APIs, different user interface. But if you can somehow abstract yourself away from that and manage it centrally, regardless of where you are, you're much more likely to be secure, right? I mean, you are not securing your infrastructure; the vendor is securing their fabric. Now, you don't do this in the data center. In the data center, you control everything. So this is why sort of a mind shift. When you move, often people lift and shift. I take my data center stuff and I just move it all to the cloud. But oh, the cloud's doing a lot of work for me, so I forget about security. So it is a mind shift, and some people are slow to change.
Yes. And speaking of mind shift, this term keeps popping up, shift left.
Uh-huh.
So we know, I'll just, for everyone listening, just a baseline definition, that means we are putting security controls and responsibility at the beginning, middle, and end stages of the application lifecycle, right?
Mm-hmm.
From development to production. So what are some of the challenges that are coming with this concept of shifting left? Because there's some implications from a technical perspective and an organizational perspective. You just talked about collecting this data, having a cohesive security monitoring, functioning capability across dispersed architectures, speaking different languages. We get this data from the extraction layer. This is what we do at Illumio. We provide this information, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where is it going? With shift left, it needs to go in the hands of different people, right? Maybe the application team. Who's using this information to properly and efficiently secure their environments?
Yeah, so security is generally not something developers think about, but that's often where the shift left problem happens. So code, there might be malicious code in the compilers that they're using. People often download things from GitHub. There's a lot of open source tools out there. They don't know if there's malware there, right? So you have to sort of assume that, malware is not going to only hit, if you shift right, that's where the firewalls are and host. That's where we see ransomware, right? Mm-hmm. But shift left is at the beginning of the whole CI/CD pipeline. If there's some kind of sleeper cell in there or some kind of malware that wakes up later, you either need to scan your code to look for malicious activity, or with Illumio, we will prevent anything from spreading that might wake up that nobody knows about. So the developers checked, they didn't find anything. They downloaded something from GitHub and it looked okay. But then, a week later, something wakes up and tries to spread. Illumio will prevent that from happening, even if we don't know it's there. Right. So we need to assume that it can come from anywhere. And so you want to shift left, and shift right. And you want to be able to prevent propagation anywhere in that cycle.
Is the idea, because if you're waiting to apply security parameters after production of the application, then you're already losing ground, versus if you can be proactive and monitor the code that's getting pushed out and spinning up services in a matter of seconds nowadays, right? Using cloud native infrastructure, that's changing so frequently, that code being updated, and very easily we could insert a virus into our system without even realizing what we've done, right?
Yeah. Malware can enter anywhere in this cycle, and we're used to, the shift right mentality. But there's malware that will sit there for a while. It may sleep for a month and then wake up later. So we have to assume that happens. So with Illumio, you're protected against that, because we may not even know what that malware is, but we will prevent it from spreading.
Right. But that's a key point you said. It's a mind shift change, like you said in the beginning. And there's a phrase you just used, it slipped my mind. But the point is, it's not just moving the security processes to the beginning stages of the life cycle, to cultural change as well.
It is, yeah. The developer culture and the security culture don't play well together traditionally, right? The developer sees security as just a roadblock. Like, let me develop my code. But you don't want your code to break the infrastructure. So it is a bit of a, political challenge. You have to sort of convince people to do this. And with Illumio, you can actually avoid some of that diplomatic problems, because we're protecting the developer from their own mistakes, right?
We just got to make sure they know that the data is available, right? And that's where we can help with that cultural shift within the organization, which I think is cool. But to wrap this up, workload to workload segmentation is the number one key end goal for zero trust segmentation, whether your workloads are staying in a private on-premise data center or moving between public cloud environments, or all of the above. And so what should an organization do to reduce the risk across these hybrid environments? We know that the challenges are real. So we've mentioned a few things that are top of mind. There's the processes, the cultural change that comes along with that. an overlaying technology that's abstracted from the underlying architecture. Is there anything else you want to leave our listeners with before we go?
Yeah, I guess keep in mind that segmentation is traditionally a networking conversation. So we're going to look for, in the data center, I'm going to maybe have VLANs or some SDN tools. In the cloud, they have security groups. So some people will say, I'll just use those. I have 10 workloads, I can create 10 security groups. But as you scale, those cloud segments were not designed for workload segments at scale. So if you put in Kubernetes, for instance, Kubernetes could cause an explosion of the number of things to segment. So all of a sudden you have like 1,000 things to segment. The cloud is not going to offer you 1,000 segments into Fabric because those tools were meant for networking things. So I think people need to remember that we're talking about workload segmentation. So we need a workload solution. The cloud or the data center Fabric was created for like traffic engineering or preventing DDoS or some networky things. So we need to make sure that the conversation about segmentation doesn't get stuck in the network conversation.
Got it. Think beyond the network, get to the workload.
Yeah, exactly. Go directly to solve the problem directly at the source.
Well, thank you so much for your time and all the words of advice and wisdom to add to this topic of discussion. It's one of my favorites. I know it's one of yours as well. A lot more to come in this series. We got a lot more topics coming up. Join us next month. Now I was going to say next week, that's a little too soon, but next month as we talk about migrating to the cloud. All right, that's a wrap for today's video, challenges in securing the cloud. Make sure to follow us on our social medias, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter. Keep up with the latest videos in this series as we discuss all things under the sun for cloud security and cloud migration, giving you the tools and discussing the topics to help you navigate a very nuanced journey. So until then, talk to you next time.